No, 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 Jonathan cried. His small fingers, trembling, opened his bag again and again, hoping against hope that he had been mistaken. But the sight that met him each time tore at his heart. The envelope with his school fees, meant to secure another term of learning, was gone. Ah, no, 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 Jonathan cried, sinking to the ground, dust sticking to his tear-streaked cheeks. He beat the earth with his tiny fists, his despair echoing down the empty street. Each stone, each stray leaf seemed to mock him, and the heat pressed down like a heavy blanket. How could a simple walk home have turned into such disaster? People passed by, traders returning from the market, women balancing heavy baskets of yams on their heads, children running after each other, laughing. But Jonathan's cries were swallowed by the ordinary noise of the village. No one stopped, and for a while he felt utterly invisible. That was when Auntie Grace appeared. Her head was covered with a faded scarf, her hands rough from years of tending her little vegetable stand at the corner of the village market. She had little, barely enough to put food on her own table, yet something in Jonathan's wailing drew her near. "Child, why are you crying so?" she asked, gently, kneeling beside him. Her eyes were kind, though lined with worry and hardship. Jonathan shook his head, unable to speak through the lump in his throat. "Tell me," she insisted. "Maybe I can help." And so, between sobs that threatened to drown him, Jonathan explained. The money for school fees, his father's hard-earned savings, had disappeared. Each word was a dagger, each tear a plea for help he felt ashamed to ask for. Auntie Grace reached into her small worn purse. It was nearly empty. She had just enough to buy vegetables for the week, perhaps, and a few coins to get her back home. But something stirred inside her, a deep human impulse that could not ignore the suffering of a child. Without a word, she handed him what she had saved, her last coins pressed tightly in his trembling hand. "Go to school," she said simply. "Don't let this stop you from learning." Jonathan looked at her in disbelief. But you don't even know me," he whispered. "I know enough," she said, her smile gentle but firm. "Go and make sure you study hard. That's all I ask." Jonathan clutched the envelope to his chest, a strange warmth blossoming in the middle of his despair. Little did he know, this small act of kindness would set off a chain of events that neither he nor Auntie Grace could have imagined. That evening, the small room they called home felt heavier than the scorching sun outside. Mr. Okoro sat on the edge of the worn wooden chair, his forehead creased with worry. The lost school fees had gnawed at him all day, a constant reminder of how fragile their life had become. He watched Jonathan carefully place the envelope on the table, eyes still wide with disbelief at Auntie Grace's generosity. "Your auntie, she helped me, Baba," Jonathan stammered, his voice shaky. Mr. Okoro rubbed his tired eyes. "Yes, my son. Sometimes people show kindness when you least expect it," he murmured. Then, as if a sudden thought struck him, he stood up, pacing the small room. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the last few naira they had saved for emergencies. This could be nothing, or it could change everything," he muttered to himself. The one lottery ticket seller at the corner of the village had promised stories of miracles, and though Mr. Akora had never bought a ticket before, desperation gnawed at him. Jonathan watched, curious and fearful, as his father handed over the money. "Baba, we can't even eat properly. Are you sure?" he asked. Mr. Akora's eyes softened. "Sometimes, son, when all else fails, you must hope. Maybe this is our miracle." With a trembling hand, he bought the ticket. The small slip of paper felt heavier than any school book, heavier even than the burden of their worries. That night, they went to bed without dinner, their stomachs empty, but their hearts strangely full of anxious anticipation. Little did they know, the universe had been listening, and in its quiet, mysterious way, it was already setting the stage for a fortune that would change their lives forever. The next morning, when the lottery numbers were announced on the old crackling radio, Mr. Okoro could hardly believe his ears. One by one, the numbers matched the ticket in his hand. 30, 7, 11, 33, 70, all matched. "Jonathan, son, sit down," he cried, his voice trembling with disbelief. Jonathan rushed over, his eyes wide as he stared at the ticket. We won! We won!" The small room erupted with joy and disbelief. Their last coin, a gamble born out of desperation, had multiplied into a fortune, 300 million naira. The world outside seemed suddenly alive with possibility, a life that had once seemed out of reach, now within their grasp. Yet, even in their celebration, Jonathan's mind drifted to Auntie Grace, kneeling by the roadside that afternoon, giving him hope when he had none. Somewhere deep down, he knew that kindness, simple, selfless human kindness, had lit the spark that would change everything.
The village of Ijebu-Igbo had never seen anything like it. News of Mr. Okoro and Jonathan winning the 300 million naira jackpot spread faster than fire in dry grass. By the next morning, neighbors peered through windows, whispered on street corners, and shook their heads in disbelief. Some were envious, others hopeful, but all were curious about how a humble family could suddenly rise from the dust of daily struggle to the dazzling light of wealth. For Jonathan, life changed in ways he had only imagined in dreams. No more walking barefoot to school or worrying about torn uniforms. He now had books that smelled of ink and leather, and shoes that fit snugly without the pinching of wear and tear. Mr. Okoro, once burdened by daily struggles, hired help for their small shop and even bought a tiny car that rattled more than it glided, yet brought an inexplicable pride. Despite the whirlwind of change, Jonathan never forgot the small acts that had led him here. He remembered Auntie Grace, the widow with worn hands and a heart far larger than her means. Her kindness, unassuming yet powerful, had given him hope on that dusty road. One evening, as the golden sunset painted the walls of their new home, Jonathan approached his father. "Baba, we must help Auntie Grace. She helped me when I had nothing. We cannot forget her." Mr. Okoro nodded slowly, pride swelling in his chest. "Yes, son, that is the way. Wealth without gratitude is empty. Tomorrow we will find her." The next day, they returned to the small corner of the market where Auntie Grace sold her vegetables. Time had not been kind to her. Her small stand was now even tinier, her baskets patched with bits of cloth, and her scarf faded to almost nothing. But when she saw Jonathan, her face lit up in recognition. "Jonathan, is that really you?" she exclaimed, wiping a tear from her cheek. Jonathan ran to her, bowing in respect before speaking. "Auntie Grace, you saved my school life, my future. We are better now, thanks to you. Let me help you." Tears welled in her eyes. "Child, I did nothing but what I could. I never imagined." Jonathan interrupted, smiling through his tears. "It doesn't matter. You gave me hope. Now let me give you a chance to live better, like you made me live better." Auntie Grace shook her head, overwhelmed by both surprise and gratitude. She had been poor, barely making ends meet, yet the boy she helped, without asking a name or reward, had returned with the power to change her life. That evening, as the village whispered about the Okoro's newfound wealth, a quiet story of kindness and reciprocity unfolded, one that no amount of money could overshadow. The following morning, Jonathan and his father returned to the market, this time with a plan. They had brought with them enough money to help Auntie Grace rebuild her little vegetable stand, buy fresh produce, and even set aside a small emergency fund. But more than the money, they brought respect, love, and a promise her hard work would finally be rewarded. Auntie Grace's hands trembled as she accepted the bundle of cash. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, tears flowing freely. I never... Jonathan placed a gentle hand on hers. "You don't have to say anything, Auntie Grace. You saved me when I had nothing. Now it's our turn to make sure you never go without." The villagers watched in amazement. Some whispered, "See, this is how life should be. Goodness comes back to you." Others shook their heads, muttering about the sudden wealth of the Okoros, but even the skeptics couldn't hide their admiration for Jonathan's thoughtfulness. Over the next few weeks, Auntie Grace's tiny stall transformed. She painted the wooden boards a bright, cheerful blue, laid out her vegetables in neat, colorful piles, and even hired a young boy to carry the watermelons and yams.
Her life, once filled with struggle and scarcity, now brimmed with hope and possibility. But what touched her most wasn't the money, it was the respect, the care, and the gratitude of Jonathan and his father. Every day, Jonathan stopped by her stand, sometimes just to chat, sometimes to carry a basket, and always to remind her that kindness is never wasted. One afternoon, while arranging her tomatoes, Auntie Grace laughed, a sound that hadn't echoed through the market for years. "Jonathan, my child, you have brought sunshine back into my life. I feel like I can breathe again." Jonathan smiled, feeling a warmth that money could never buy. "Auntie Grace, your kindness gave me life, gave me a future. Helping you is just a small part of giving back what you gave me." And so, in the heart of Ijebu-Igbo, a quiet revolution of generosity unfolded. A poor widow who had given selflessly and a boy who had received her help now stood side by side. Proof that even in a world filled with struggle, one act of kindness can ripple into countless blessings. Life was not always smooth, even with money in hand. The village of Ijebu-Igbo, like any place where fortune and envy coexist, carried whispers of jealousy and the occasional misfortune. Auntie Grace, though happier than she had been in years, soon faced a challenge she hadn't anticipated. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the market emptied, a sudden storm swept over the village. Rain pelted down like tiny stones, and the wind whipped through the streets, toppling signs and scattering leaves. Auntie Grace's newly rebuilt vegetable stall, despite its sturdy structure, shivered under the assault of the storm. She tried to hold it steady, pulling at the corners of the tap, but the wind was relentless. One large gust sent a basket of tomatoes rolling into the muddy street. She stumbled after it, her feet sinking into the wet soil. Fear clutched at her chest, not for herself, but for the life she had worked so hard to rebuild. Just then, a familiar figure appeared, running across the slippery road. Jonathan, soaked from head to toe, grabbed the corner of the tap and steadied it with all his strength. "Auntie Grace, hold on to this," he shouted over the roar of the wind. Together, they managed to secure the stall, moving her produce to a safer spot. By the time the storm passed, everything was drenched, some vegetables ruined, but the stall had survived. Auntie Grace, shaking and shivering, looked at Jonathan with tears in her eyes. You came," she said, her voice barely audible. "Even after everything, you came for me." Jonathan shrugged, though his chest swelled with pride. "I promised, remember? I promised to be there. You saved my life once. I can't let a little storm destroy yours." The villagers, who had seen the storm's chaos, later whispered about the boy who had risked himself for an elderly woman. Jonathan and Auntie Grace became a quiet legend, a story parents would tell their children about loyalty, courage, and the power of gratitude. That night, as they sat together under the patched tap, sipping warm water and sharing a few dry yams, Auntie Grace realized something important. Wealth could be lost, storms could come, but the bonds forged through kindness were unshakable. Jonathan smiled at her, his young eyes wise beyond his years. "Auntie Grace, it doesn't matter how many storms come, as long as we have each other, we can face anything." And for the first time in years, Auntie Grace truly believed it. Years passed in Ijebu-Igbo, and Jonathan grew from a timid boy into a thoughtful young man. His school days, once shadowed by fear and uncertainty, were now filled with books, tutors, and opportunities he had never imagined. His father's shop expanded into a small chain, and their house transformed from a humble dwelling into a home of laughter, learning, and warmth. Yet, Jonathan never forgot Auntie Grace. Every school break, he visited her stall, sometimes helping her arrange the vegetables, other times simply sitting and listening to her stories about the village's past. The bond between them was more than gratitude. It was family forged through kindness. One afternoon, while helping her carry a basket of yams, Jonathan stopped and looked around thoughtfully. "Auntie Grace, your stall is doing well, but I've been thinking, what if we made it bigger? A proper shop, maybe even a place for other widows to sell their goods too." Auntie Grace blinked in surprise. "Jonathan, are you serious? I don't know how to manage such things. I've lived with this little corner my whole life." Jonathan shook his head firmly. That's the thing. You've done more than survive, Auntie Grace. You've thrived. Now it's time for others to have the same chance, and I'll be here every step of the way. Together, they began planning. They surveyed the market, spoke to neighbors, and even discussed hiring a small team to help with the shop. Slowly, the dream took shape. A modest building of bricks and tin with clean shelves, baskets of fresh produce, and a corner for widows to sell their crafts. The villagers watched with curiosity and soon admiration as Auntie Grace's life transformed once again. This time, not because of sudden wealth, but because of a vision nurtured by the boy she had once helped. One evening, as Jonathan counted the day's earnings with her, he smiled and said, "See, Auntie Grace, kindness keeps giving. You helped me when I needed it most, and now I'm helping you, and soon many others. That's how life should be." Auntie Grace, her eyes moist with gratitude, nodded. "Jonathan, you've turned my little corner of the world into something I never dared dream of. You've given me more than wealth. You've given me purpose." And as the sun set over Ijebu-Igbo, casting golden light over the new shop and bustling market, both of them knew that the seeds of kindness, once sown, could grow into something far larger than any fortune. Word of Auntie Grace's new shop and Jonathan's generosity spread like wildfire through Ijebu-Igbo. Villagers who had once whispered about the Okoro's sudden wealth now spoke of their kindness and vision. The market, which had once been a place of quiet survival, began to buzz with renewed energy. Other widows, inspired by Auntie Grace's success, approached her and Jonathan for advice. "Can we sell our goods here too?" one woman asked, her eyes wide with hope. Jonathan smiled, feeling the familiar warmth of purpose in his chest. "Of course, there's room for everyone. This isn't just Auntie Grace's shop. It's a place for anyone willing to work hard and be honest." Under Jonathan's guidance, the small market corner blossomed into a community hub. Children helped carry baskets, elders shared advice on farming and cooking, and laughter echoed through the aisles. Auntie Grace, once a lonely widow scraping by with her meager earnings, now oversaw a vibrant enterprise that supported dozens of families.
One day, as Jonathan arranged baskets of fresh yams, he noticed a group of children playing near the stall. One of them tripped, spilling a basket of tomatoes, and began to cry. Without hesitation, Jonathan ran over, helping the child gather the fruits while offering gentle encouragement. Auntie Grace watched from her counter, a soft smile on her face. "Jonathan," she said quietly, "look at what we've built. Not just a shop, but hope. You've given this village something money could never buy." Jonathan shook his head humbly. "We didn't do it for money, Auntie Grace. We did it because you taught me that kindness matters. That's the real fortune." Even the elders in the village began to speak differently. Stories of Jonathan's and Auntie Grace's generosity replaced the gossip about wealth and luck. Young people started helping the elderly, neighbors shared harvests, and the market became a place of cooperation rather than competition. In that bustling corner of Ijebu-Igbo, it was clear. The ripples of a single act of kindness had grown into a wave of transformation, proving that even the smallest gesture could change the lives of many. By now, Jonathan was no longer the timid boy who had lost his school fees on the dusty road. He had grown into a young man of purpose, respected by his peers and admired by the villagers. Yet, life, as always, had a way of testing even the kindest hearts. One afternoon, news arrived that the local school was in trouble. The headmaster announced that the building was crumbling, classrooms were overcrowded, and many children risked being sent home due to lack of resources. Jonathan's heart sank. He had been given a fortune, but now he realized that not all problems could be solved with money alone. He went straight to Auntie Grace, who was arranging baskets of tomatoes. "Auntie Grace, the school, it's falling apart. The children need desks, books, uniforms. Some don't even have shoes. We have the means, but how do we fix it properly?" Auntie Grace looked at him thoughtfully. "Jonathan, money can buy what they need, yes, but it's the love, the care, and the consistency that will last. You can give them once, but teaching them to value education, that's the real challenge." Jonathan nodded, understanding that this was more than a financial task.
He rallied the villagers, young and old alike. Some helped with repairs, others volunteered to tutor children after school, and some donated what little they could spare. Together, they built benches, painted classrooms, and filled the library with books. On the day the new school term began, Jonathan stood at the front of the assembly hall, looking at the eager faces of children whose lives had been touched by his family's fortune and by Auntie Grace's earlier kindness. He said, "This is what happens when we care. We give not just money, but time, effort, and love. That is the true wealth." Auntie Grace, standing in the back, smiled proudly. "Jonathan," she whispered, "you've learnt well. You've turned your fortune into something greater than money. You've turned it into hope." And for Jonathan, that was the greatest reward of all, knowing that his family's blessings, combined with the lessons of kindness he had received, could light the path for others. It was a scorching afternoon in Ijebu-Igbo, and the market buzzed with its usual energy. Auntie Grace was at her stall arranging baskets of tomatoes, onions, and peppers, humming softly to herself. Jonathan had stepped away for a moment to check on a delivery of yams, leaving her to manage the busy corner. Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the far end of the market. A small fire had broken out in a nearby storage shed, the dry wood crackling as flames licked the sky. Panic spread quickly, and the villagers rushed to flee. Auntie Grace froze, her hands gripping a basket, her heart pounding. Without hesitation, Jonathan ran back towards her. "Auntie Grace, move!" he shouted, grabbing her arm. But she refused to leave, terrified for the produce that had become her lifeline. "I can't just leave it. Everything I've worked for," she cried. Jonathan shook his head firmly. "It's not worth your life. Trust me." As smoke thickened and the heat intensified, Jonathan guided her towards a narrow alleyway that led to safety. Behind them, a strong gust caused burning debris to fall dangerously close. One glowing ember struck near Auntie Grace, and in that heart-stopping moment, Jonathan pulled her down to the ground, shielding him with his own body. When the fire brigade arrived minutes later, the shed was destroyed, but Auntie Grace and Jonathan were safe. She looked up at him, trembling, soot on her cheeks. "Jonathan, you saved me. Again. After all these years, you..." Jonathan smiled, brushing off some ashes. "Auntie Grace, you once saved my future. Today, I just returned the favor. That's what family does. That's what kindness does." The villagers watching from a distance erupted in applause. The story of Jonathan and Auntie Grace spread even further now, not just of wealth or generosity, but of courage and loyalty. In that moment, the bond between them had come full circle, proving that kindness once sown could save lives, literally. That night, as Auntie Grace rested in her small home, Jonathan sat beside her. She held his hand, smiling through tears. "You've given me more than safety, Jonathan. You've given me life and meaning."
Jonathan's heart swelled. "Auntie Grace, your kindness started it all. I only did what you taught me, to care, to act, to protect. That's all any of us can do." And in the quiet of that evening, the village understood something important. Wealth and courage are fleeting, but the legacy of kindness lasts forever. Years had passed since the dusty road where Jonathan had lost his school fees. The boy who once wept under the scorching sun had grown into a young man whose heart was as generous as it was strong. The village of Ijebu-Igbo had changed with him. Children learned not just from books, but from the stories of compassion, courage, and gratitude that had begun with one small act. Auntie Grace's shop thrived, becoming more than a marketplace. It was a place of learning, of mentorship, and of community. Young widows sold their goods, children helped tend the baskets, and elders shared wisdom alongside the fresh produce. The market had transformed into a symbol of hope, proof that one act of selfless kindness could ripple through countless lives. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Jonathan and Auntie Grace sat on the wooden bench outside her shop, watching children play and neighbors greet each other warmly. "Do you remember," Jonathan said softly, "the day you gave me my school fees?" Auntie Grace nodded, her eyes shining. "I do. I never knew who you were, yet something told me I had to help. I never imagined it would lead to all this." Jonathan smiled. "It wasn't just the money you gave me, it was the belief in me. That belief changed everything."
Auntie Grace placed a hand on his. And look at what you've done with it. You've built more than a fortune, Jonathan. You've built lives. You've built hope. The village children, unaware of the conversation, ran past them laughing, shouting Jonathan's name. The market bustled, not just with trade, but with life, learning, and gratitude. Stories of Jonathan and Auntie Grace became legend, told around evening fires, whispered in classrooms, and shared with visitors to the village. And so the cycle continued. A single act of kindness had blossomed into generations of generosity, courage, and compassion. Wealth, it seemed, was fleeting, but kindness endured forever. Jonathan leaned back on the bench, feeling the warm African sun on his face, and knew this truth with all his heart. What you give freely returns in ways you could never imagine. Sometimes saving lives, sometimes shaping the future, and sometimes, as in his case, transforming the world around you. The boy who once cried on a dusty road had become the man who carried hope, proving that even in the smallest corners of life, greatness can grow. If this story touched you, don't leave quietly. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment to tell me your favorite part, and please share this video so others can enjoy it too. Your support means everything. Bye.